Excuse me, sir. Do you know where homeroom 102 is? No, I don't. Leave me alone, man.
Bruh.
You should already know where your class is at. Oh, well, I'm new to the school, so that's why I don't know where my class is, but thanks anyway. Uh-huh.
Bruh.
Whatever. Oh, Lord! The fuck? Hey! Yeah? You a student? Yes, sir. I'm new here. Oh, Lord! You hoop? Oh, no, I definitely don't hoop. You don't hoop? Boy, how tall are you? I'm like 6'8", 6'8 and a half. And you don't hoop? No, sir. I don't. Man, get on with that, man. You play some other sports then, huh? No, sir. Oh, Lord!
Bruh.
What the hell do you do? I don't know. I game. You game? What? Hell no. Nah. Hey, come with me, bro. You trying out for the squad. Wait, sir. No, I'm serious. I don't hoop. Yes, the hell you do. You not finna be walking around these hallways built like a tree and not playing for me. Come on, Stilts.
The reality of it is they want us to think poorly of ourselves. That's the only conclusion I could really come with, because there are positive stories that they can do. There's positive, I mean, just take for athletes. If an athlete does anything negative, that will be on the top of Sports Center. You know, I mean, I just did a panel in Baltimore at New Psalmist Church, had, you know, the main players from the Ravens, you know, had Torrey Smith and Juan Dixon from the Maryland Terps, who, you know, won the championship. Big deal here, right? And, you know, none of the local newspapers wanted to cover it. BET covered it, but none of the local newspapers wanted to cover it. But had any of those athletes done anything negative, they would have been right there. You know what I mean? It would have been on the top of the news stories for every single day, and especially leading up to Father's Day. So that's what they would have done. And it's just the way that it's the constant demonization of us in the media that's been happening for decades. But it's not like it's getting better. You know what I mean? It's not like it's getting, you know, they'll show all the bad stories of, you know, athletes as far as fatherhood, as far as they have all these baby mamas and they had this going on and they, you know, losing their money and all this, but they don't show the good stories. There's plenty of good stories out that they can report on, but that don't make the news, right? That doesn't make Sports Center.
Peace to the party. It's your homeboy back again with the news. Yeah, so you know we've been deep in the bag over the holiday weekend. Hope y'all ain't missed me too much, but I'm back with the news, man. And today, I saw something the other day, man. It really intrigued me to want to talk about this because we're gonna pick at the media every chance we get. Mainstream media gonna always do what they do, but today we're using sports as an example. You know, I don't get too much into the shows and the movies that come out. Every now and then it's a couple that I like, but sports is pretty consistent for me. No matter what's going on, even though they got their biases and things going on, I'm just a sports head. It just is what it is, right? So when I seen Stephen A. Smith, he was getting some more flack. So you know how we do. Whether we agree or disagree, we got to be unbiased to the facts. And we've highlighted Stephen A. before in things that we do agree with. But on this one, I can't rock with Stephen A., man. He doing his bid and doing what he do. You know, like that boy Kwame Brown say he in the go along, get along game. You know, they say they send him to be the one to be the spokesperson for things and use a black man to say disparaging things about other black athletes. But I want y'all to hear these comments for yourself because it was pretty crazy what was being said. So I want y'all to hear it. And y'all let me know what y'all think. Like we always do. We talk about these things and we decide for ourselves what's really what. So I want to take it over here. Let's play this video so you can get the context and hear what Stephen A. said. Then we're going to come back and break it down.
YouTube family. We got a week that started off blazing trails. So Stephen A. Smith calls out Jaylen Brown, and he questions why the star is not underrated as a star, basically validating what people are saying, allegedly from his source, a source that seems to bother Isaiah Thomas, who would call out Stephen A. Smith for his protege. Because if you guys don't know, Isaiah Thomas was the mentor for Jaylen Brown when Jaylen went to California University. He mentored him up and helped him through the draft process. Just a lot of things we're about to get into with receipts and video clips. Before we get started, I need you guys to hit me with my theme song.
Heart been broke so many times. He knows.
So Stephen A. Smith questions the validity of one Jaylen Brown as a superstar, and he went in with this entire situation. Now, people are calling it an unfortunate identity crisis for one Mr. Smith, who lashed out at Isaiah Thomas for defending Jaylen Brown. If you guys don't know what happened, what Stephen A. Smith actually said about Jaylen, he mentioned a whole lot of things that would actually make any fans and supporters of guys like Jaylen lash out. These were what he said towards Isaiah Thomas for the situation.
Brown, it's not so much that he's underrated, it's that he's just not liked because of his quote, "I am better than you" attitude. He knows it. It's the same reason he is not as marketable as he should be. That's what an NBA source just sent Brown. It's not.
He said a source just told him that that's why he's not marketable. Now, we've heard these things over the years before, and things like this being spout out about about Jaylen Brown. We know in 2016 he was declared the 2016 NBA's draft Renaissance man. The reason why he was declared that, he chose not to get an agent for the draft, and he basically knew how to handle things himself, you know what I mean? And it really made a lot of disgruntled GMs and executives angry towards Jaylen Brown for this move, because it shows that Jaylen can pretty much do without the NBA. And we know Jaylen has been a typical eccentric fashion since coming into the league, a man of many things, and that can bother and worry some people in the NBA who don't like it. Now, the source also said that it's not so much that he's underrated, it's that he's just not liked because of his "I'm better than you" attitude, the source allegedly said. Me personally, I think this is light skin versus dark skin. We're gonna indulge into that, but let's go to what Isaiah had to say. Isaiah wasted no time to catapult and respond to Stephen A. Smith. He said, "I have been a friend, mentor, and advisor to Jaylen Brown since he was a student at UC Berkeley. He is 100% marketable, and before you slander his name, at Stephen A. Smith," and he added Stephen A. Smith too, "tell your source to put their name on it or don't speak on it. Let it be known." Now, I gradually was going back and forth with my thoughts about this, but I agree with Isaiah Thomas. There's been a lot of so-called journalists and analysts and pundits, and I call them so-called because they have been anything but professional. They like going on these rants and these whiff-a-raws to diminish the worth of someone's value as a human and their character as well, with these unnamed sources that they literally could have taken out of their 4 points of contact. Like, how do we know what you're saying is true when you're never validated with an actual source who come to your defense? So pretty much this is a cheat code that most people like Stephen A. Smith use because they are passive aggressive. They don't want to tell you that's how they felt. But Stephen would then respond to Isaiah Thomas. He said, "I have no idea what you're talking about, Isaiah Thomas. I have been a fan of Jaylen Brown for years, still am. What's unfortunate is that you, who's known me for decades, would choose to go on Twitter, which is now called X, to express whatever dissent you feel instead of calling me directly, but I get it." Now, the hypocrisy of this Stephen A. Smith quote right here where he says, who you known for decades and you could have just called me, and he said whatever dissent you feel instead of calling me, but I get it. Well, Jaylen Brown could feel,
And that's all cap, man. So let me break this down for y'all on what's what. So y'all can understand. So Jaylen Brown, the NBA player, plays for the Boston Celtics. So they're saying that this brother is not marketable. The source came, Stephen A was the one who brought this out of nowhere about Jaylen Brown. Okay. Unnamed NBA source. And what the brother was saying in this video right here, this is a way that they can use. They can come up with their own takes. These so-called journalists can come up with their own takes and then hide it behind saying an NBA source, an anonymous source, because they can always say, hey, I'm protecting my sources, right? So Stephen A tried to clap back at Isaiah Thomas. Shout out to Isaiah Thomas, always been solid, one of the best point guards to ever play the game, right? He always been solid and been speaking against power, truth to power, should we say, right? So he come and take defense of Jaylen Brown because lo and behold, he mentored Jaylen Brown like he's done several other players, right? Real OG in the game. So he fired back at him. Jaylen Brown fired back as well. But for those of y'all who may not even be fans of the game and may not understand, let me show you how bad of a take that this really is. So this is a brother who made it to the highest level in his profession. All right, so let me give you a few little stats on this brother that don't got nothing to do. Well, it's not basketball in totality. So tell me, does this sound like somebody who's marketable or not? So Jaylen Brown, he just won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. This just happened the other day, right? He signed the largest contract in NBA history, 5 years, $304 million. And Buddy is an academic genius. Why do I say that? Well, let me break it down. So, and remember, he got that contract without an agent. So it's funny how all these brothers that do these deals without agents, they get vilified by the media. Some would say that's a coincidence. I highly doubt it. But here goes some stats. So when he was drafted in 2016, they was already putting a slander on his name. They were saying that they thought that he was too smart and had other interests, so they was going to stay away from him. He was the top of his class in high school. He was a 5-star recruit in basketball, could have went to down there any school in the country. He chose University of California, Berkeley, which is known to be an academic school. He chose them on purpose. So he was a chess varsity team at Cal. He could play the piano and the guitar. He took graduate classes as a freshman, learned multiple languages, youngest person to ever lecture at Harvard. He's an MIT Media Lab fellow. He was offered a NASA internship. He's only 22 years old. He's the NBA vice president for the Players Association. Okay. He was teaching a robotics session when he found out that he got that 300+ million basketball contract. Brother spoke out on he'd be active socially, you know what I'm saying, speaking on social justice. And he also talked about when he got that big contract, talking about how he wanted to build Black Wall Streets. Now tell me what's negative about this brother to where any company wouldn't love to hop on and get behind this man. Tell me what coach at what school would not love for Jaylen Brown to pull up and talk to his kids, because he's the epitome of what a good coach would want. You would want somebody, right, who's sound academically, responsible, you feel me, and excelling in whatever their craft is. That looked like a gold mine to me for any coach. I'm just saying that any of y'all ever play sports, tap in and tell me what y'all think. Does this sound like a brother who's marketable? Because it don't make no sense to me why Stephen A would say that. But I'm going to tell you why it makes complete sense, because he's too clean and well put together. He would say things that would not align with the way in which the media wants to portray the black athletes. This ain't just no, I don't like to just throw race and things that don't exist, but this is documented. There's been a lot of research to this. So you know your homeboy with the news, I got y'all. I want to play a clip from a sister that used to work. I think she may still work at ESPN. I'm not sure, but ESPN has been having a lot of problems with black talent. Okay. It just is what it is. This is why Stephen A made the move to get Shannon Sharp, because they needed help. They was getting destroyed by FS1. You know what I'm saying? It just is what it is. But I want you to hear from Taylor Rooks, a journalist who has worked with ESPN plenty of times. I want you to hear what she had to say.
You've been vocal about racism on social media. Can you give your perspective on NBA fans using the N-word and other racial slurs with NBA stars this season?
Yeah. Well, if an NBA player hears the N-word from someone that they feel should not be saying the N-word to them, then they shouldn't be saying it. And I think that that's really like the most important part of this conversation is sports has been a vehicle to highlight many social issues, like whether we see it with Kaepernick, whether we see it with fans using racial slurs, whenever we're talking about the way that a coach maybe talks to his like black player. Sports has shown us that racism is something that is incredibly alive, and just because it isn't blatant, like someone saying the N-word doesn't mean it isn't as apparent. A lot of the racism that is most damaging is the stuff that's subtle, right? Like we get caught on the N-word because it's such a charged word, and we know that there's some people that should not be saying that word, and that becomes the conversation. But there is so much more that we need to talk about. The way that we have coded language when we talk about certain black athletes, it's so passionate on the field, you know? Why can Odell Beckham Jr. not do this, but like Tom Brady can? Like, what is the thinking behind that? What makes us put certain athletes in a different light than others and hold certain athletes into a different standard? And that's, I think, kind of the bigger conversation, like understanding where that kind of implicit bias comes from. We really use a lot of coded language in sports. Even if we're talking about a black quarterback, right? We want to say that he is athletic or that, you know, but it's never that he's smart. And the black quarterback can be just as smart as any of the white quarterbacks, but that's just not the first thing that comes to our mind because of so many things that have been drilled into us by code and other words. So while it is so important that they should not be saying the N-word to players on the court, there's a lot of other racism that we have to attack that we're ignoring because it isn't so blatant. But no, nobody should be saying the N-word to the players on the court.
Gotcha. Speaking of Kaepernick, what do you think about recent reports of him and Eric Reed receiving $10 million in their collusion settlement? Yeah. Do you think Kaepernick will play in the NFL again?
I hope Colin Kaepernick plays in the NFL again. I completely stand with Cap. I stand for anybody that recognizes that there is an injustice that needs to be fixed. At this point, though, I think Kaepernick is a symbol of something bigger than football. I mean, there are a lot of things bigger than football. I know how much we love the sport, but he's fighting for something that really, really matters. People.
So what's the overall synopsis here? You get these players, right, who ascend to the highest level in their profession. And just because they do that, that does not mean that they don't have any civic engagement. They don't care what's going on with their community. It's as if when they get in these positions, they aren't allowed to have any type of free thought, any type of social justice minded type of topics. Anytime that happens, it becomes a problem unless what's being said from that individual fits the agenda, right? And it's crazy how this works because we're talking about Jaylen Brown, who I read off some highlights from this man's life that didn't have much to do with basketball, and it would make you think like, damn, okay, he fit the stereotype of somebody who you would think that they want to promote. Clean-cut dude, no tattoos, no trouble, whole bunch of money, very successful, talking about education, talking about history. You know what I'm saying? It don't make sense. So this is why you'll get Stephen A will come out randomly and say something like what he said, because if this was done by a white reporter, they would eat him alive for saying this. So they need somebody like Stephen A. Smith to come out and say this. This is why he's been getting a lot of pushback from black athletes, especially, right? And in this case, I can't blame them because he looked crazy. Like, why would you even, till you get somebody who want to put a name on that source, why would you even come and say that when his brother is succeeding right now, knowing that you saying that could make it to where it hurts certain opportunities for him? You get what I'm saying? So why you even play that game? But I want to show y'all how if you come along and, you know, I don't know if y'all ever watch any of the drafts or if you watch documentaries on certain players that come on major TV, they love to highlight the people that came from a one-parent home. If you came from a bad environment full of drugs and all of this, they're going to have this in your story every time that you speak. And if you cool with that, they'll push you as far as you can go. But if you push against that, it's going to be a problem. So some of y'all may have heard about Kwame Brown. He done blew up on YouTube. I want you to hear out of his own mouth how he was saying that he had to turn down interviews because of a certain reason. Let me show you why.
To go talk about my daddy being in prison. See, I know why they don't like me. I turned down so many interviews. Everybody coming out the woodwork to talk about what that bitch ass Charlemagne was talking about. Everybody came out the woodwork trying to get me to talk about how strong my single mama was for getting me to the NBA and this and this and that. And I said, wait a minute now. The story didn't kind of go like that. I said, I worked and I helped mama. I was working since I was 14 to help mama. But you guys want me to get on TV and say mama did everything when I watched the situation and the pain and the struggling that my mama went through? You wanted me to get on TV and trick people into thinking that my mama did that? Do you know I had to work? My mama gave me the wisdom, but my mama couldn't do everything. So it ain't no way in the fuck I was gonna go lie to people the way some of you big outlets were asking me to do. So that's why I think y'all targeted me. That's why no matter, go back and look at some of my games. No matter if I was playing well, no matter.
And so what he's saying is, so Kwame Brown was a #1 draft pick, came straight out of high school to the NBA, right? This is when they basically tried to end this whole straight to the NBA situation. So he come #1 straight out of high school, and all of a sudden, he's been labeled a bust. Now, mind you, he played over a decade. So if you a bust, you don't play over a decade. But the media narrative on him right away was this, and it was led by none other than Stephen A. Smith, right? So how could a man who come through the circumstances that he went through make it to go and be #1, play 10 years just for his whole career? People was labeling him a bust, to the fact that people that didn't know nothing about the game was calling this man a bust just because they heard it from the media. But if he would have got down and played their game, he just said they wanted him to talk, because Kwame Brown came from a real situation. Father in prison, unaliving somebody, brothers in the streets, grew up in poverty. This is what they wanted him to highlight. And every time they put a mic in front of his face, he was talking about positivity, talking about building up communities, getting kids in different educational programs, right? And then all of a sudden, he public enemy #1 to the media. You see what I'm saying? Instead of talking about all the good in the situation, they automatically framed it in a negative light. And they do this all the time, right? There's so much positive that happens from different Black athletes, but that won't get the exposure. But let them mess around and meet any so-called stereotype, it's going to be front page news, right? Now think about Kyrie Irving, another player who went, put his family on to be his agent, doing his own thing, speaking out socially. All of a sudden, he was public enemy #1 because he didn't want to get in line and get that jab. You feel me? So they was after him. It's not a coincidence that certain players that fit these molds, who you would think they would want to talk about and promote positively because they are positive people, they only get the back end of things, right? But then you got people who do all kind of stuff, get away with egregious crimes, the whole nine, and they'll still let them be a part of the league and try to, make a case for them. It's just crazy how this works, right? If they fit the stereotype. So, yeah, I'm just your homeboy with the news. Y'all may think I'm capping. You may just think, he on some Black Power shit. Nah. This has been widely studied, bro. I want to show y'all this video, this TED Talk of a white guy who was a journalist, sports journalist, breaking down how this really worked behind the scenes. So I want you to hear some of the research that he did, and we gonna get up out of here.
Has always been the great equalizer in this country, but that's not entirely accurate. Sure, there are examples like Jack Johnson, who won a world championship in 1908 as a black boxer, decades before African Americans earned equal rights in this country. But in sports, and specifically sports journalism, let's just say things are not always that equal. I was a journalist for 9 years, and when I went back to grad school, I wanted to find out just how unequal things were. But it turned out I don't have to. Scholars have conducted dozens of studies that look at how sports journalists and broadcasters stereotype athletes by race. What did they find? Yes, journalists and broadcasters consistently and constantly stereotype athletes by race through their word choices. Intelligence, background, motivation, physical strength, effort, leadership, right? These are all word choices that journalists make when they're talking about athletes, but they do so in a racialized manner. Let's take Cam Newton and Tom Brady as examples. Now, we can all agree Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback to ever live, right? Ever? Easy? Yeah, no doubt about it, right? But when Brady succeeds, do you ever hear journalists or broadcasters talk about his natural talent or his athleticism? For a guy to win 5 Super Bowls, play in 8, and win an MVP after the age of 40, you'd think he'd have to be pretty damn naturally talented and athletic. But when Brady succeeds, journalists often talk about his intelligence or his effort. Now compare Cam Newton, right? Guy won a national championship in college, played in a Super Bowl, won an MVP in the NFL. You'd think for a quarterback to do that, he'd have to be pretty damn smart and work really hard. But when Newton succeeds, it's often about his physical strength, right? Or his natural talent. And that's the thing with athletes and stereotypes. If you're white, regardless of the sport, you're often talked about in terms of intelligence or effort or how great of a leader you are. If you're black, it's about physical strength, natural ability, or athleticism. If you're Latino, maybe you're fiery. Asian, intelligent, good team player. Trust me, now that you're aware of this, you're going to see it every time you look at the sports section. Those stereotypes are good. They're positive. They're not negative. But the problem is, when we start to label people completely based upon their race, with no scientific evidence to back it up, we start to see race, which is entirely a social construct, as something that actually matters. This is what we call everyday racism, a sociological concept that describes the subtle ways that we treat people of divergent races differently. We see a guy in a Klan hood, right? We know that guy's racist. We can say it, it's easy to identify, it's clear. Everyday racism is about the tiny, sometimes not even discernible ways that we treat people differently based on their race. For example, when we compliment a black woman for being, quote, articulate, or we ask a Latino person where they're, quote, really from, that's everyday racism. Scholars argue that everyday racism is more insidious, more harmful than overt racism because we do it without thinking. And when we do things without thinking, we believe them more easily. Stereotyping is a 2-part cognitive process. It's both automatic and controlled. We know stereotypes because we see stereotypes in the world all around us, on television, in movies, on the radio, in books, and so on. We know stereotypes because media representations of stereotypes are literally everywhere around us. So when we encounter somebody from a group that might be different than us, maybe by race, maybe by gender, maybe because they look like they ride motorcycles, all the stereotypes about that group enter our brain. That's the automatic part, right? That's not wrong. But the part that we can control is, do we apply those stereotypes? Essentially, do we believe them? Now, we know sports journalists and broadcasters stereotype athletes. But the question is, do those media representations affect our behavior? About 8 years ago, some colleagues and I started to conduct some experiments to determine whether regular people stereotype athletes based on race. What did we find? Yes, absolutely. People stereotype athletes based on race. Let me give you an example. So we recruit hundreds of people for an experiment. We don't tell them anything about it. We split them into 2 groups randomly. Both groups read the same stories that highlight and accentuate specific athletic attributes. So for example, both groups will read the exact same story that talks about how smart an anonymous athlete is. But here's the difference. Above that story, one group will see a photo of an anonymous white athlete. The other group will see a photo of an anonymous black athlete. Now, here's the crux of the experiment. If people don't stereotype the athletes, they would rate them the same in intelligence because they read the exact same story. But that's not what happened. Our participants rated the white athlete significantly higher in intelligence. The same thing happened when we used a story about effort, or when we swapped out stories for ones about physical strength or natural ability. Our participants rated black athletes significantly higher. So then we thought, well, maybe it's about the race of the participant. So we did another experiment. This time we oversampled black participants. And what did we find? Well, black participants actually stereotyped more strongly than white participants. So for example, black participants rated white athletes as significantly higher in intelligence than white participants did, right? So what we're seeing, essentially, is that journalists and broadcasters stereotype athletes, and then we do too.